Protection Act, the letter, and also the Private Security Regulation Act could fall under Section 30, 1B. This section provides that data processing is necessary for compliance with any legal obligation to which the controller is subject. So essentially, it does fall under also the fall under the Data Protection Act will fall under Section 3 because it provides for the requirements in terms of legal obligation. However, we see that there are other issues that are involved in this. So, correlation of the Section 48 of the Private Security Regulation Act is in compliance with the legal obligation. However, in my view, the issue is whether some of these private security companies have the necessary privacy policies and data protection policies in place to ensure that the data subject personal data is protected. Also, there's also the issue of are the security guards well trained in terms of information security, data subjects, and also how do they store this data to ensure that also this personal data does not it is not leaked or it's not stored in a manner that is detrimental to the rights of the data subject. We also have the other issue of, because you've seen that according to the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, there are certain, especially SMEs or other companies who are still not registered with the ODPC or are not compliant with the data protection laws. So as they put this statement out there, I think it is necessary for them to also include the requirement for those companies to be compliant with the Data Protection Act, so that to ensure that as much as it is in compliance with the regulation, the part where it insists that it's a legal obligation. When there is a legal obligation on data processing, that is it's mandated. So to ensure that at the same time as you're protecting, ensuring security and all that, you also protect the rights of the data subject. So when it comes to the issues of necessity, consent, and public interest, we find that, for example, necessity dictates that any data collection and retention measures must be essential for a legitimate purpose. So in this case, we also have the issue of how are they collecting that data, how are they retaining it, are they compliant with all the principles of the data protection laws. So in my view, yes, it is compliant with in terms of the Data Protection Act on the legal obligation. However, if in case the companies or the security companies are not compliant with the data protection laws, we find that this will also infringe the right to privacy under Article 31 of the Constitution of Kenya. So they need to harmonize the same and to ensure that as much as the requirement is there for them to retain certain data or CCTVs, that they are also compliant with the data protection laws to protect the rights of the data subject. Thank you.
And thank you for that, Esther. Maybe I could move on to just add on to what you've just said. So in your opinion, I'll start with you, Esther. What steps have been taken to ensure that the data collected and the data collection and retention process is adhered to with principles of data protection in mind?
I think what we can maybe say is, if you are an organization maybe in the security space, what measures would you ensure that you've just taken to ensure that you're adhering to privacy principles? I think it's good to ensure that you are applying the principles, maybe in the sense that the data that you are collecting is being used specifically for the purpose that you have given. That would mean if you're employing personal purpose limitation, if you're collecting the ID details for purposes of maybe verifying the visitors that are coming with to your organization, you ensure that these ID details are not being used for any other thing. That would mean that when I walk into a building, I do not expect my details to be shared to some marketing agency. I do not expect to now start receiving random messages for marketing. The other thing would be, you would need to ensure that you are collecting as minimal data as possible. if you can be able to identify someone maybe from their ID number, you don't now need to ask them maybe for their phone number. What would the phone number be used for if at all it is not for identifying them? You need to ensure that you are doing the minimum when it comes to collecting personal data. And it comes to now asking yourself a few questions. Does the data have a direct effect to what you're collecting it for? Or could that objective that you're collecting the personal data be achieved by collecting less data? Then you'd also need to ensure that, again, you are now not storing that information for no longer than is necessary, which would entail that you now need to define the retention period. If I receive, if as an organization, or if I am a security company in an organization where they receive so many visitors on a daily basis, and the purpose would be to verify maybe that these people are not here for the wrong reasons. I think Matthews, you'll need to mute. Yeah, sorry about that. I was saying, as an organization, you'd need to define retention periods. How long do I need to store this personal data for? Do I need to come back and refer to it on a daily basis, or maybe in the next 3 months, do I need to come back and refer to this information again? So if this is information that I do not need, other than maybe for verifying individuals, then it wouldn't make sense to even keep it maybe for 3 months or 6 months. Again, that is now where the legitimate interest of the company come in. Why am I collecting this information? Is it important? What would be the effect if I was to actually maybe destroy or delete this personal data I'm collecting at the entry points? The other thing I would need to know is, you had asked Njoki, what would be the steps to be taken to ensure that maybe data collection processes are adhering to the privacy principles? It would be good to maybe have a privacy notice for transparency purposes. And also train the security guards. Let them know why they're collecting the information so that they can be able to tell the individuals walking in what they need their information for. We need to collect your ID details to verify that maybe you are indeed, if I say I am Esther, how do I prove that I am Esther? I will definitely need to produce my ID details. Am I collecting information for public interest? For instance, we've all gone to Times Tower. If you go to Times Tower, they always collect your ID. They maybe give you some sort of temporary card to access the building. So maybe at that particular entry point, there would need maybe to be a transparency notice or a privacy notice just telling individuals, we are collecting your data. This is how we use your data to just verify that you are who you say you are and that you have come maybe to sort your tax issues. If not, we will not be able to grant you access to the building. Yeah, so I think that's that for now.
Okay, thank you for that, Esther. And like it's maybe important to also bring it out that in most instances you find that buildings have this notice for, as much as people are becoming more aware towards the issue of data protection. Remember, always the building reserves the right to entry. So you can't say you're not, someone's not going to take my details because of data protection. I think that's also important to bring across. And just to add on to this conversation, maybe Linda, you could touch on the fact that some of these buildings, other than having the security guards who are not trained, or there's no notice, there's also the issue of CCTV cameras, and they also collect this data. So how do we move? What are these steps that we should take in ensuring that this data collected and returned, and the retention period of this data is actually adheres to principles of data protection?
Thank you, Council. On that note, you have to establish the best data protection protocols. So when it comes to CCTVs and all that, this includes secure storage, also restricted access of those CCTVs and all that, because when you talk about the accommodation places. There are instances where such information can also be involved in data breaches and all that. Also, there is a need to establish and have regular data impact assessments, data protection impact assessments to identify and mitigate the potential risk. There is a need also to have regular audits and reviews that should be conducted to verify compliance with the Data Protection Act and also other relevant regulations. So just to add on also what Esther said in terms of the principles and how do you collect this data and how do you retain it. There's the issue of the data minimization by ensuring that these companies collect the data and ensuring that the information collected is not excessive given the purpose of the collection. So therefore, the information should be adequate and relevant, and where the purpose allows that, where the expense involved is in proportion with the goal, there is the need to ensure that the data is not misused. So we also have the issue on public purpose limitation, which is one of the principles that the data should be collected for explicit, specified, and also legitimate purpose, and not further processed in a manner that is incompatible with those purposes. So when they collect this data, it is CCTV and all that, that they should use the data collected itself in the purpose in which which in this case should be included now in the data protection policy and privacy policy that they should have in place as a security company. So we also have the issue of even CCTVs and especially the fact that CCTVs in accommodation areas is such a sensitive information. We find that there are also cases in which surveillance in residential areas are limited. We find that there was also a case which rendered that the same, but in relation to this statement, we find that there's need for the data to be processed in a way that is lawful, fair, and also transparent. And in this case, integrity and confidentiality is a main principle that they should consider, in which the data must be processed in accordance to the right to privacy, and also must be treated as confidential information, and with that have secured suitable organizational and technical measures to prevent unauthorized access, illegal processing, or also distribution of such videos or that are taken up by the CCTV, so that to ensure that there is no any accidental loss or modification also or destruction of the same. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Maybe just
a minute,
okay. Yes, okay, sir.
Just to add on to what Linda has said, Linda has brought up very valid points. You'd need a CCTV policy, just a document that now states what Linda has said. We have these data protection principles. How is our CCTV installation matching up to these principles that we have that Linda has highlighted?
Okay, maybe just to add on to the policy issue, what are some of the things for just anyone who's here and probably wants to draft this CCTV policy or just any privacy policy or notice? What are some of the guiding factors should they look out for when they're drafting this policy? Esther or Linda, you could answer that.
The guiding factors would be the principles of data protection. We have the first one, lawfulness, transparency. Am I being lawful? Am I allowed, or is my processing or data collection within the confines of the law? Am I collecting the CCTV footage in accordance to the purpose that I had said? Am I sticking to that purpose? Am I minimizing the data that I'm collecting? Do I really need to have a CCTV in all points of my establishment? The point of CCTV is to monitor or maybe to track who has entered, maybe to ensure that you have security, you're keeping tabs on your property. The other thing, as Linda had mentioned, do I have the appropriate technical and organizational measures to ensure that this CCTV footage I'm collecting, it is not going to be unnecessarily shared, or it is not going to go into the wrong hands? A good example would be when something happens, especially a crime or just something bad in general, when it happens, and especially I'd give an example of these femicide cases that have been going on. We now find that CCTV footage has been now revealed. We see that, oh, apparently this guy came into the lift. This is what time he came in. You see, such things should not be falling into the public without the proper authorization. And you find that if we do not have the appropriate technical and organizational measures, you would see the effect. The effect would be that sometimes unnecessarily or sharing or revealing personal data would, in some instances, be a hindrance to justice itself. The other thing we would have in our policy would be storage limitation. Do I need to keep this footage for no longer than is necessary? And this is what now prompts us to have defined retention schedules. You need to define how long you're going to keep the CCTV footage for, and what happens after you've kept this footage. Am I supposed to archive it, or am I supposed to delete it? The other thing would be accountability. You need to be accountable over this information that you are collecting, and such things would now after you've drafted your policy, it would now prompt you maybe to have a sort of checklist. I have now this policy, but what does it actually mean for me to implement it? That would mean maybe I need to have some sort of poster that tells people that this building is under CCTV surveillance. I think I can leave the rest for Linda to add.
Yes, I'm in agreement with Esther in terms of how do we draft this policy. With the CCTV policy, if you're including the measures in terms of how you collect the data CCTV in the privacy policy or data protection policy, some of the major things that you're going to look at is each and every principle of data protection, which, as she said, is confidentiality, transparency, lawfulness, accuracy, data minimization, purpose limitation, storage limitation, accountability, and also data transfer. Because when you talk about CCTV, this is something that also can be modified and modified in various ways. This is also personal data that requires for you to ensure that you store it in a manner or in a specific period of time in accordance to that same purpose. So these are some of the things that you should include when you're drafting that CCTV policy. Look at each and every principle of data protection and ensure that it is indicated, and you specify some of the issues that are necessary in terms of also preventing unauthorized access of the same, ensuring that in terms of distribution, there's no illegal processing or distribution of the same. Also, you have to ensure that if you maybe, for example, third party, so the data should not be disclosed to any third party. So you find that also some of the CCTV videos are usually shared anyhow when you find such cases where these CCTV are put in public. So these are areas you need to look at when you're drafting that CCTV policy to ensure that your organization or the security company and organization also protect the rights of the data subject. Also, one important element that I need to mention is that in the statement, there is also a need to ensure that when you talk about having CCTV cameras, specify where exactly, because when you talk about accommodation facilities, this can be in the house, and when you talk about CCTV in your Airbnb, this is the potential of having some certain sensitive information in that video itself. So it's very necessary to ensure that that data is protected and cannot be abused, or if in any case it is hacked and shared, it does not bring about other rights of privacy issues and all that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And you just brought something to my attention. This whole issue of, okay, I know in most instances the CCTV camera would be outside the building, but there are
Yes,
instances where these CCTV cameras are being put inside their Airbnbs. So I don't know if it feels like a breach of privacy because I'm imagining a situation where I go to this Airbnb and unknowingly there was a camera there that was recording like my whole stay when I was there. So I don't know. In my opinion, I feel like that is a breach of privacy, to be very honest. I don't know what is your take on this, Esther and Linda?
That is definitely a breach of privacy. When we read, is it Article 31 of the Constitution? It says that every individual has the right to privacy, and there's also a statement that normally says, or you can't just enter into someone's home or someone's space without actually letting them know. So I feel it, in as much as the Airbnb would be not belonging to the customer, but essentially you cannot be purporting maybe to be in the business of letting out the premises and then infringe on their privacy. When we are normally drafting maybe lease agreements or sublease agreements, we are always putting the clause that the tenant essentially should have quiet enjoyment. So if you look at it from those 2 points of view, I feel, in my opinion, it would be a serious breach of privacy to have CCTV cameras without the knowledge of the of the individual.
yes, for sure, I wholly agree with Esther. When it comes to where we use to set the CCTV, you'll find that most of them are usually just outside. But you'll find that these are considerations that other for all owners of Airbnb are thinking of due to some of these cases of theft and all that. So that is in itself, it is something that is prohibited. There is a case, there was a petition that was filed where it was it was sort of like a divorce case. So some of the pile of documents that are brought to court were phone calls, videos, CCTV messages, and all that, CCTV videos. So it was held that it is prohibited for them to use such surveillance mechanisms, and that was also not taken up. So when you talk about the right to privacy, it talks about you have the right not to be, obviously, your property being seized, your property being inspected. We also have the issue of ensuring that any information is not distributed or is not taken without also your consent. So when you talk about having CCTV inside the Airbnb or any accommodation facility, this is a major breach of the right to privacy. Also, given that the potential risks that come with that. So, in this case, you'll find that in terms of having CCTVs in residential areas, even that in itself, when you put a CCTV in a residential area, you're required to seek consent of the data subject, and this is something that is also included in the law. So, in terms of that, I would say ensuring that even as they put out the statements, to ensure that some of these companies comply with the data protection laws, and ensuring that they're also specific when you talk about having CCTV, pinpoint exactly where to have them, so that to ensure that also the right to privacy is upheld. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
sorry about that. Section 26 of the Data Protection Act also gives us the rights of the data subjects, one of them being the right to be informed. So if you are if you are going to collect CCTV footage of individuals, at least let them have that right to be informed.
Okay, thank you for that, Esther. Also, just to add on to the right to information, as you're training these guards, because that's one of the recommendations that both parties have made towards security guards being empowered in terms of data protection. So it's important for them also to tell these visitors when they're coming in why they need to retain their ID, why they need to check their car and whatnot. So the right to information is key. So this act, the Private Security Regulations Act, it's actually a 2016 act, and the data protection law came into force in 2019, 2020, I must say. And obviously the law doesn't work retrospectively. So in your opinion, are there any alternatives to retaining this, other than retaining an ID, that could be effective in enhancing security without compromising data protection? Because you've also mentioned the issue of storage limitation, but there are instances where these books where they write information, I'm so sure when they finish with them, they probably burn them or they just throw them or sell them to third parties without your knowledge. And then that's when you start getting these unsolicited messages, or even sometimes it goes to the extent of maybe the security guard himself just sending you a message and telling you, hi, sasa mkubwa, ni mimi nilipita. I don't know, those weird messages that they send. Also for the instance of CCTV cameras, yes, there's this sign, but they're not working, some of them, and now what's the whole point? So in your opinion, do you think there's another alternative to this whole situation? I'll start with you, Linda.
So thank you, Jackie. For me, I would say what other alternatives are there to ensure that also your data is protected? I would suggest involving using unique identifiers that is less intrusive while still serving the intended security purpose. So in this case, you are able to minimize the personal data and also have some type of anonymization such that it's only the company that will be able to know and will be able to have the access to it. So this will also strike a balance between security needs and also protecting individual privacy. So you also talked about the fact that the law does not work retrospectively. So there's also the need to review the privacy, to reduce the Private Security Regulations Act, because as you know, this law was not enforced before. Was enforced before the Data Protection Act. So they need for us to review the act itself before even ensuring that it is operationalized, by harmonizing it and ensuring it aligns with the Data Protection Act, so that also we are able to, as they try to operational make it implement the Section 48 of the Private Security Regulations Act. As they implement it, they are able also to protect the rights of the data subject. So my suggestion is to have unique identifiers in terms of that. Thank
you. Esther.
Yeah, I think much has been said by Linda. Just to note is, I think where we are as a country, we have a lot to work on. So having alternatives to IDs would take a lot of intentionality and awareness when it comes to matters privacy.
And remember, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat box. Just before we continue, let me just read some of the comments. From Christmas, he says the implementation of this directive must proceed with thorough training to enable the security guards to appreciate the limits in the collection of personal data. This is very true. Sometimes you even find rude security guards, they're not even explaining to you where they're taking this information. So it's important for them to undergo this training. Then from Emily, having paid to stay in the Airbnb for a day, I own the place for the day, and that's Article 32A, or not having my home. Yes, the right to privacy. I very much agree with that. Then this directive extends attack surface for cyber criminals, since the whole point is to verify the physical security. what measures, I'm not sure if this is a question, what measures are in place to protect such information from falling into the wrong hands? Then all what is required is to have a comprehensive private information policy and training and awareness. Yes, I do agree with all those sentiments. And just to add on to the topic of cybersecurity, how will any potential abuses or violations of privacy be addressed, and what consequences may arise from non-compliance? This is in the situation of probably, as I just mentioned, the books, or rather the information falling into the wrong hands, you getting the unsolicited messages, probably the security guard not explaining to you and just kicking out. Okay, I know they have the right, they reserve the right of money admission. However, if someone is not explaining to you a concept and they're just telling you to get out if you're not going to allow your car to be searched. So I'll start with you, Esther. How do you think there'll be, do you foresee any potential abuses or violations of privacy? And what are the consequences of non-compliance for probably like these security companies or these buildings that default on this?
Yes, I foresee potential abuses of privacy. Simply because one, there's a lot of lack of training and awareness on the side of the persons collecting this personal data. I feel like most of the people who collect personal data at entry points, they collect personal data because they were told to do it, not because they know why they are supposed to do it, other than just verifying the identity of the individual. Do you know that you are actually supposed maybe to ensure that whatever materials you're using to indicate the identity details or to store the ID card of the individual, they are not aware of that responsibility of ensuring that it has been properly safeguarded. Then the other potential risks would be, again, a legal risk if, because now data subjects are becoming more and more aware of their rights. If someone feels like their details were now unnecessarily revealed because they visited a particular building and they are able to prove that, that would mean that now they can be able to report the matter at ODPC or even sue where they feel that their privacy has been infringed. Now, this poses the risk of financial risk. The organizations that have collected this information would be at a risk of being fined or being penalized by a court of law. Then, which brings us to reputational risk. If I know that if I visit a certain building, that my details, if I give my personal details, that they will come up somewhere or go or land in the wrong hands, that would mean I will not feel comfortable visiting that building. So if as a business owner, I am in a particular building that now does not receive a lot of human traffic, then that would mean I will now move my business to another secure and a more profitable location, for a lack of better word. Yeah. The other risk would be this personal data would put the individuals at risk, either physically or even online, because their details have been shared, the ID details have been shared. We all remember there's a time where there was this circular that was going around where during election period, where we had been registered as members of different political parties. I'm sure that none of us had actually taken the initiative to register ourselves to those respective political parties. So the question now comes, how did people manage to get all those details to maybe register us or register in other individuals into those respective political parties? So that now comes putting the individuals or the data subjects at actual physical harm. Yeah, thank you.
Linda, do you have anything to add on?
Yes, I think Esther summarized most of them, but for now, I would say the consequences that could come out of this statement would range from fine to also suspension of operations, depending on the severity of the violation. We also find that there will be a lot of cybersecurity risks that come again with this. Maybe when we talk about some of the CCTVs and all that, we also have reputational risks that will come about when we talk about how will the security companies be implementing this. If they will be following the data protection laws by having the right organization security measures and also the privacy policies in place. We also have the risk of financial risk in case of any data is misused that is collected from such accommodation facilities. So with this, you also find there will be a lack of trust with maybe clients and all that. When you find that yes, these accommodation facilities or this Airbnb has CCTV inside, this will also it can lead to a lack of trust and also just having financial risk in terms of not attracting a lot in terms of that, because for you when you also have the risk of legal repercussions that will come again with this. This will come about because I foresee having there'll be a lot of complaints with the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. This is in terms of how the data will be used. So that's why it's very important for them to train the security guards and be able to ensure that the private security companies are also well trained in terms of data protection and privacy to ensure that the data that is collected is well stored, it's well maintained, it's well secured, and it's well protected as well to prevent such risks. There's also the risk of modification. We are also in the era of AI and all that. We also find there's a lot of deepfakes. So you could be seeing a video that is actually modified and you're not quite sure how it will go thereafter. We also have the risk of leaking of personal information, as Esther had said. So you find that if your personal data that maybe is shared from such companies is leaked in one way or another, this will be a major issue that will come around about. So in terms of the consequences of non-compliance will be fines, penalty notices, enforcement notices, all within the mandate of the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, you can hear. Yeah, thanks for that, Linda. So maybe just to add on to the conversation of probably CCTV cameras, once again, sorry. And other than CCTV cameras, there are these buildings where other than the old school ones where they write your information on a book, there are these ones where they input your information maybe in a computer or something like that. And we really do not know how long this information is stored. There's a building in Westlands, I will not mention the name per se, but they have this policy where when you visit the building and they take your ID details, they state that they actually put your information in the system for infinity, I would say so, because they want to avoid a situation where if you come back again as a visitor, they have to do the whole process again. And in my opinion, of course, this is breach, because what if I'm a foreigner and I'll probably never come back to that building? So of what importance is it for them to retain this information for this long? So what are some of the technical and organizational safeguards that some of these institutions, organizations should be putting in place in terms of now safeguarding data? I'll start with you, Esther.
If a building is keeping information for infinity, they would really need to ensure that they're investing heavily on security. They would need to ensure that all this information that is stored online is appropriately protected by having maybe the right IT solutions. This would mean that maybe they need to have regular checks on their networks, maybe do vulnerability and some sort of penetration testing to ensure that their ICT system is actually stable and secure. They have also ensured that all the employees are adequately trained on cybersecurity and matters privacy, and actually document these trainings. But then again, they would need to have a privacy policy that is very explicit and makes the individuals aware that we collect information, we will not delete it. But you see, if you're not deleting information and if you're storing it indefinitely, you should have some sort of provision for pseudonymization. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Esther. Anything you want to add on, Linda?
Thank you. In terms of what are some of the organizational security measures that they can take as a private security company, you have to ensure that you have the right data protection and privacy policies in place. You have to ensure that you have strict access control, that is ensuring you have restricted access in terms of who has access to the personal information, so that in case of any instance, any accident, any threat, you are able to know who to hold accountable for the same. We also have ensuring that the sensitive data is encrypted. There is encryption and encryption of the sensitive data that you've collected to ensure that there are no data breaches on the same. We also have ensuring that there is adequate training in terms of data protection and privacy for all employees within the security company, for the security guards, for the people, for the the ones that are processing the data, for also all the employees within the company are well trained in terms of how to ensure that the data that is collected is well secured and protected. We also have ensuring that the data itself is monitored. And they monitored privileged access to it, so that not anyone has access to the data that is stored, the data that is retained, and also have the right measures in terms of how long are you going to retain it, and also how are you going to, if you're going to retain it within 6 months, how are you going to, if you're going to delete it or just delete it, that all that, ensuring that it is a measure that when you say you're going to store it for a period of 6 months, then where will you take the data after that? If you're going to delete it, ensure that that has happened, ensuring that there will be no any data leaks onwards. Also, just in terms of ensuring that also the cloud security, these are robust data protection controls that should be placed to ensure that your data is secured. Also having the right physical security in itself. So ensuring that the physical security is also good in terms of if they are going to be writing in a certain book and all that, ensuring that the data, no one can just come and maybe they take a picture of all that data and be able to use it somewhere else. So in terms of not only internal security but also external security of the same, and ensuring that you just comply with all the principles of the Data Protection Act, including all that data minimization, purpose limitation, and and all that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Linda. Thank you for that, Esther. Okay. Can we share the soft copy of the directive? Joshi, I think that, okay, I'll try and find it. Okay, just write the email, but it's somewhere online. It's everywhere online, but if I get it, I'll share it to your email. I don't know if anyone has the questions. You have the floor. Let me just read this comment from Sandra. She says that she agrees that having a data retention policy is crucial for those organizations. It's essential to note that certain information, which is the personally identifiable information, is documented in the hard copy books at the security buildings, and this definitely poses a risk of falling into the wrong hands. So I don't know if there's anyone who has a question just before I let them. Oh, okay. Omari, you can unmute yourself and ask the question. I don't know if, okay.
Hi, my name is Nekerario Omari. I'm an digital investigative journalist, working with Africa Uncensored. And the question majorly leans on the media, and it's about right to information, especially for CCTV footage and company records and all that, because those are some of the things that we do at Africa Uncensored, obtaining company records and all that, and also CCTV footage, which we've seen with the femicide cases that we've been experiencing. So now my question is, how does the retention policy compel journalists or investigative publications for such data? So like CCTV footage that is featured in a documentary, for example, and it's not been blurred. How does the retention policy compel journalists to, provide that data, or rather to feature that for a period of time? Because if it's featured in a documentary that's published online, then it's there for the longest time. So I don't know how. I really don't know what's the law around that. Yeah.
Linda or Esther, you could take this before I make my comment.
So I think I need to define the purpose of the retention policy or a retention schedule. A retention policy is a document that states how long as an organization you need to keep certain information for. So let's say if I have CCTV footage, maybe in my organization, I can say we'll keep this information for 6 months. The reason we'll keep it for 6 months, we will have identified the respective laws of Kenya to identify any statute of limitations for maybe cases that might go to court, or maybe any footage that might be used for legal purposes. Then again, the other point was that you had asked what would be the implications if we were to take CCTV footage for purposes of using in the documentary. Initially, when now you take CCTV footage that was being used for purposes maybe of identifying individuals and for security of the premises and of the individuals, or maybe for the public interest, you would really need to justify, which again would be a very tall order for you. You'd need to justify why you are allowed to use this CCTV footage, because now the purpose has changed. And the purpose has changed from now security or verification of individuals to now another totally different purpose, which would be maybe for a documentary. And if at all now this documentary is not for the interest of the public, then you would now be infringing on the rights of these individuals, because I feel you would now need to have consent of whomever is in this CCTV footage. Because if you're not going to use this footage, maybe for court case or any other legal matter, you now need the explicit and informed consent of these individuals who are appearing in this CCTV footage. Linda, do you have something to add?
Yes, on that, I would like to mention between section 51 to 55, which talks about the exemptions in the Data Protection Act. So if you're going to use it for journalism purposes, section 52 of the Act expressly sets an exemption for journalism, literature, and art. It also says that that data processing principles do not apply if it's for publication of artistic or literal material, and it should align with public interest, following specific ethical codes, and also is incompatible with data protection compliance due to the special circumstances. So when you find there are certain exemptions that are there, for example, there is national security, public interest, use of journalism, literature, and art, especially with public interest. And however, as you do so, you also you also ensure that you adhere to some of the rules of some of the principles of the Data Protection Act. However, for journalism, that is also one of the exemptions in the Data Protection Act. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question.
Okay.
In the case of Starlet Wahoo, we saw CCTV footage that was making rounds on Twitter and all that. And what I noticed, I think maybe it was easy for me to notice that because maybe I'm really passionate about tech-facilitated gender-based violence on OGBV. But what that footage did to her as a woman is it placed her in a position of being trolled, especially based on the dressing the dress that she was in, and also all the questions around going to an Airbnb and all that, a discussion I maybe don't want to get into. Then do you think that the public, or even these social media platforms, they have failed in regulating some of the content that is shared on their platforms? Because for that CCTV footage, it turned from content that is very important to the public to something that really brought her down as a woman. And she was bullied, she was trolled and all that, as much as she was not, she wouldn't know what happened. But I feel like that was something that, I mean, the footage was manipulated to become something else. So then how does the law come in for such an instance? Because the public had access to that footage, and it was really manipulated for the wrong reasons.
I hear you, Omari. It's when you talk about it from that point of view, it's very unsettling and also to some point very saddening. It is now very unfortunate that the Data Protection Act does not recognize personal data when it comes to deceased individuals. The Act only recognizes to living human individuals. So now those now become issues of societal change, issues that we need to change and we need to start thinking about as a society. It's also very unfortunate that the family cannot maybe sue on the case of maybe defamation, because again, now defamation is now a legal wrong that is not only actionable by the living individual. So now those are now issues that need to be talked about. But I feel like, in my opinion, I have not seen any form of legal action or legal recourse that has been given to such cases.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe just to add on to what Esther said, I know the Data Protection Act is being amended, so I'm hoping these are some of the factors that these guys who are amending it, the writers, the regulators, is something to look into so that this is addressed. Also, maybe I'm not too familiar with the journalism laws on how to spread of information, retaining of information is, but at the back of your head, I think you should just remember the data protection just acts as a guiding act to how you collect data, how you process data. So yeah, I'm just hoping maybe this new act will provide some insight to that. For Linda, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yes, I think I would. For me, I would agree with what Esther and you as well have said. Unfortunately, in this case, she is late. However, I would like to note that in such circumstances of technology facilitated violence, the Data Protection Act may not expressly just prevent such instances where videos are shared, videos are manipulated, and all that. However, we have the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, which essentially, for example, Section 37, it talks about a person who transfers or publishes any and disseminates any digital kind of depiction available, distributing or downloading through any telecommunication network for any intimate or obscene image of another person commit an offense that is liable to conviction for a fine or not a killing to escape. So when defined with such instances, if the person is alive, they can be able to actually go to court, but under the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, because it also caters for cyber harassment under Section 27, which talks about if a person is individually or with another communicate directly or indirectly in any conduct that is likely to cause damage or is detrimental to affect another person, grossly indecent or offensive in nature, shall also be liable to a fine. It also, Section 27 also talks about cyber harassment. So if the person is alive, unfortunately, she's not. She could be able to actually go to court, but under Computer Misuse and Cybercrime Act. I think we also have, when you talk about technology facilitated violence, I think we also saw such a case when Azia went to court under the Computer Misuse and Cybercrime Act as well. When it comes to the Data Protection Act, the as far as it can be used is maybe under Section 26, which states that any data collected by a data processor controller shall be subject to consent, and non-consensual sharing of such maybe intimate images or images of individuals is under the violation of Data Protection Act. So mostly when you're talking about the technology facilitated violence, what will cater for it is the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, and also Article 31 of the right to privacy under the Constitution of Kenya. That's all.
I hope you've been answered. There's one more question from Matthews. He would like the panelists to highlight any other alternatives recommended means to verify customer authentication, and how long is legally recommended to retain customer data. Esther, Linda, you could take this.
So maybe I can go first in terms of how long is legally recommended to retain customer data. So for this, there isn't any expressly set month or days in which you should retain a certain amount of data. However, this is something that as an organization, as a company, you will decide when you collect data and when you seek the consent of that data subject. You expressly let them know for how long you will retain them for. So this will be subject to your discretion and according to what you will entail in the data protection policy or privacy policy. So you also stated that what is the alternative recommended means to verify customer authenticity. Maybe I would like for you to expound on the same. However, what I will say on that is you can use unique identifiers on the same to be able to verify customer authenticity. Thank you. Maybe Esther can say something on the same.
I don't have any other comment to add. Linda had mentioned about there is no definite or express provision for retention schedules. But for customer authenticity, it would depend with the respective industry or the nature of your business. If there's any other method other than having maybe the ID number, if you can maybe give a ticket number, like how we get ticket numbers when you go to the banks or token numbers, then you can be able to have individuals to maybe pick a ticket number at the point of entry.
I believe all the questions have been answered. So because we are really short of time, in a summary, I'll start with you, Linda. Just give us your 5 takes on what your take on this whole issue of security guards temporarily retaining the IDs, and what could be the way forward, and also Esther, you could do the same in less than 5 minutes, please. Maybe Esther, you could start, and then Linda.
Okay. The reasons why we have covered why security guards collect our information, it's because probably they, or not probably, they are actually entitled to do that under the Private Security Regulation Act. But now there's a lot of things that they need to do. They need to improve on issues of transparency, explain to individuals why they collect the personal data. Also, they'll need to evaluate the technical and organizational measures, ensure that they are safeguarding that personal data that they are collecting, have retention schedules, again, to ensure that they are not keeping that information for too long, and also review the maybe collection process to ensure that what they are collecting is minimal, is absolutely minimized and directly proportionate to that particular purpose. Then they need to have maybe some sort of awareness to the data subject of their rights, which is not absolute. If the individual will not give the ID card, they will not be able to access the building. However, if upon entry and exit, the individual wishes to have their details maybe deleted or forgotten, if the individual wishes to access the type of information that the organization has collected about them, then they need to have a proper system in place to ensure that these access requests are being appropriately handled. Thank you.
For me, I would say there need to be mechanisms for public input to enable certain consultation or feedback channels for such directives, which will also foster transparency and community engagement, because through this, there are other issues that arise in terms of privacy and surveillance. We also have the need to educate the security guards and ensure that as they collect the data, they know how to how to ensure that the data collected is well protected and is also secured to prevent other issues like data breaches and all that. Also, ensuring that the private companies, security companies comply with the data protection laws as they put out such the directive, which is actually in compliance with the law in terms of the legal obligation. They ensure that they are good. They have the right data protection and privacy policies, so that the rights of data subjects are not infringed. Also, we also have that they should ensure that they also have privacy programs in the private security companies and measures to comply with the data protection principles that Esther has also highlighted. So, in my view, is without proof of concrete information and privacy compliance processes and data protection laws adherence or implementing the section 48 will violate Article 31 of the right to privacy. So as long as they are able to even at least review that the Private Security Regulation Act to be able to harmonize it and ensure that it's in compliance with also the data protection law itself, so that it can be updated with some of the recent issues that have come up in terms of data protection and privacy.
Okay, thank you for that. To my guests, if you did not get anything the entire webinar, I hope you really got the key word that you talked about is train, and be aware. Thank you to my panelists. Thank you to the participants. And if you need any assistance on drafting policies, on training, just contact South End Tech. We'll be there to meet your needs. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining during this webinar, and I hope to catch you on the next one. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Have a nice afternoon.